If your mind feels like a busy marketplace tonight, cluttered with the noise of unfinished tasks and tomorrow's worries, you have arrived at the right sanctuary. Take a deep breath now. Let your shoulders drop and unclench your jaw. You need not carry the weight of the world through this threshold. If you find comfort in this space and wish to return here for rest, I invite you to subscribe to our community of peaceful seekers. Let us know in the comments where you are resting from tonight, what burdens you are ready to release. There was once a merchant named Kenji who lived in a bustling city where the streets never slept and the demands never ceased. Every morning, he woke with his heart already racing, his mind spinning through lists of obligations before his eyes fully opened. His days blurred together in an endless stream of meetings, deadlines, and expectations that seemed to multiply like shadows at sunset. By evening, his body ached with a tension so familiar he had forgotten what relaxation felt like. Sleep came reluctantly, if at all, interrupted by anxious dreams of forgotten tasks and looming failures. One autumn morning, after a particularly sleepless night, Kenji found himself walking past a small temple he had passed 1,000 times before, but never truly seen. Something in the simplicity of its weathered wooden gate called to him. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or perhaps it was the desperate hope that someone, somewhere, might have an answer to the question he barely knew how to ask. He stepped through the gate into a garden where time seemed to move differently, where even the air felt softer against his frantic energy. An elderly monk sat beneath a cherry tree, its branches nearly bare of leaves. The monk did not look up as Kenji approached, but simply patted the ground beside him in invitation. Kenji sat, and for several minutes, neither spoke. The silence felt strange to Kenji, who was accustomed to filling every moment with words, plans, and purposes. Finally, unable to bear the quiet any longer, he burst out with his question. "Master, I am drowning. Every day the pressure increases. I cannot sleep. I cannot rest. Even when I complete one task, 10 more appear. My chest feels tight. My thoughts race without end. How do I find peace in such chaos? How do I stop this overwhelming stress that consumes me?" The old monk smiled gently and reached down to pick up a fallen cherry blossom from the ground. He held it in his weathered palm, examining it as though it were the most precious treasure in the world. "Tell me," the monk said softly, "what is stress?" Kenji stammered, surprised by the question. It is the feeling of too much to do, too little time. It is worry about failure, fear of not being enough, anxiety about the future, and regret about the past." The monk nodded slowly. "And where does this stress live? Show me where you keep it." Kenji touched his chest, his head, his stomach. "It lives everywhere in me." "Interesting," the monk mused. "And before you woke this morning, where was it?" Kenji paused, confused. I suppose it was nowhere." "I was asleep." "Exactly," the monk said, his eyes twinkling with knowing warmth. "While you slept, the tasks that wait for you still existed. The deadlines remained. The world continued its turning. Yet stress was nowhere to be found. It appeared only when you awoke and chose to carry it. Stress is not something that happens to you. It is something you create, moment by moment, with the stories you tell yourself about what should be different than what is." The words settled over Kenji like a gentle snow, each one requiring time to fully absorb. The monk continued, "You see this cherry blossom? In spring, it was a bud full of potential. In summer, it was a flower of extraordinary beauty. In autumn, it has fallen. Soon, it will nourish the earth and become part of something new. At no point did this blossom resist its nature. It did not stress about falling. It did not hold on to summer while autumn called. It simply was, fully, whatever the moment asked it to be." "But I am not a flower," Kenji protested. "I have responsibilities. People depend on me. There are real consequences if I fail." Of course, the monk agreed. And does your stress improve your ability to meet those responsibilities? When your mind races with worry, do you think more clearly? When tension grips your body, do you perform better? Or does the stress itself become another burden, making everything harder? Kenji had no answer, because he knew the truth. His stress had never once solved a problem. It had only made him less capable of addressing the challenges before him. The monk placed the cherry blossom in Kenji's hand. Take this with you as a reminder. The first teaching is this: stress is not the enemy you must defeat. It is a messenger telling you that you have forgotten something essential. You have forgotten that you are not separate from the flow of life. You are trying to control a river by holding water in your hands. Then what should I do? Kenji asked, his voice breaking slightly with the vulnerability of someone who has carried too much for too long. The monk stood slowly, his movements unhurried and graceful despite his age. Come, he said. Let me show you the first practice of releasing stress. It begins with the breath, the bridge between your racing mind and your exhausted body. It begins with remembering that in this moment, right now, you are safe. You are breathing. You are alive. Everything else is a story you are telling yourself about a future that has not arrived, or a past that has already dissolved. They walked together through the temple garden to a small meditation hall. The space was simple, almost austere, with wooden floors worn smooth by countless visitors and walls bare except for a single calligraphy scroll. The monk gestured for Kenji to sit, and they settled onto cushions facing each other. Outside, the wind moved through bamboo, creating a rhythm like soft breathing. Close your eyes, the monk instructed gently. Do not try to change anything. Simply notice your breath. Where does it enter your body? How does your chest or belly move? Is the breath shallow or deep, fast or slow? Just observe, without judgment, without trying to fix or improve. This is the foundation of all peace, the willingness to be present with what is, exactly as it is. Kenji closed his eyes, and immediately his mind flooded with thoughts. The meeting he was missing, the emails piling up, the disappointment his colleagues might feel at his absence. His jaw clenched involuntarily. I cannot do this, he said, opening his eyes. My mind will not be still. The thoughts keep coming. Of course they do, the monk said with a knowing smile. Your mind has been trained for years to race, to plan, to worry. It is like a horse that has only known running. You cannot command it to stop instantly, but you can begin to notice that you are not the racing thoughts. You are the awareness that observes them. There is a difference between thinking and watching thoughts pass by. One is drowning in the river. The other is standing on the shore, watching the water flow. The monk continued, his voice taking on the quality of a gentle stream, flowing around obstacles rather than forcing through them. Let me tell you about a student who came to a great Zen master many years ago. This student was much like you, burdened by responsibilities and consumed by worry. She approached the master and said, "Please teach me meditation so I can quiet my mind and find peace." The master looked at her and asked, "Can you stop the wind from blowing?" The student replied, "Of course not. The wind blows as it will." The master nodded and said, "Your thoughts are like the wind. You cannot stop them by force, but you can stop standing in the storm. You can find the still center within yourself that watches the wind blow without being disturbed by it." Kenji absorbed these words, feeling something shift inside him, a small loosening of the tight knot he had carried in his chest. So I should just let the thoughts come and not fight them? Precisely, the monk confirmed. Fighting with your thoughts is like fighting with your shadow. The more energy you give to the battle, the more solid your enemy becomes. Instead, we practice gentle awareness. When a thought comes, you simply notice it. Ah, there is a thought about work. There is a worry about the future. There is a judgment about myself. You name it without attaching to it, and then you return your attention to your breath. Again and again, you will be pulled away. Again and again, you return. This is not failure. This is the practice itself. They sat together in silence, and Kenji tried once more. He focused on the sensation of air entering his nostrils, cool and crisp, and leaving slightly warmer. Within seconds, a thought arose about a client presentation. He noticed it, and rather than spiraling into planning mode, he silently acknowledged, worrying about presentation, and returned to his breath. Another thought came about his daughter's school event he might miss. Worrying about family, he noted, and returned to the breath. The process felt awkward, mechanical, but something about it was also liberating. He was beginning to see that thoughts were not commands requiring immediate action. They were simply mental events arising and passing away. After what might have been 5 minutes or 20, Kenji could not tell, the monk spoke again. You are beginning to understand. Now, I will teach you the second practice. It is called the body scan, and it helps you release the physical holding of stress. Your body remembers every moment of tension, storing it in your muscles, your organs, your bones. Most people live in their heads, completely disconnected from the wisdom of their bodies. They do not realize that much of their stress lives not in their thoughts, but in their clenched jaws, their tight shoulders, their shallow breathing. The monk's voice became even softer, more melodic. Keep your eyes closed. Bring your attention to the top of your head. Notice any sensation there, any tightness or tingling or warmth. Do not try to change it. Simply observe it with curiosity, as though you were discovering your body for the first time. Now, let your awareness drift down to your forehead. Is it relaxed or furrowed? Again, no judgment, just noticing. Move to your eyes, your cheeks, your jaw. Ah, the jaw. So many people hold their entire life's tension right here. If you notice tightness, breathe into it. Imagine your breath flowing directly to that spot, bringing softness and space. Kenji followed the instructions and was astonished to discover how much tension he carried. His jaw was locked like a vice. His shoulders were hunched nearly to his ears. His stomach was hard as stone. As he brought awareness to each area, he felt minute releases, tiny surrenders happening without his conscious control. The monk guided him slowly through his entire body, from head to toes, each word creating an invitation to let go. Your body is wise, the monk continued. It knows how to relax if you give it permission, but for years you have been sending it messages of danger. Your stress response, the fight or flight mechanism designed to save you from tigers and bears, has been activated constantly by emails and deadlines. Your body cannot tell the difference between a real threat and an imagined one. It only knows that you are signaling emergency, and so it remains in a state of high alert. This is exhausting. The monk allowed silence to settle between them once more, letting his teachings integrate into Kenji's awareness. The merchant sat with his eyes still closed, exploring the novel sensation of his body beginning to soften, to release layers of holding he had not even known existed. Outside the meditation hall, birds called to each other in the late morning light, their songs weaving through the stillness like golden threads. Now, the monk continued, his voice barely above a whisper, I will share with you a teaching that may seem strange at first. It is this. Your stress is trying to help you. Every uncomfortable feeling you experience, every anxious thought, every physical tension arises because a part of you believes it is protecting you. Your stress thinks it is keeping you safe, keeping you motivated, preventing disaster. It does not realize that it has become the disaster itself. Kenji opened his eyes, intrigued despite his fatigue. My stress is trying to help me. That makes no sense. It feels like torture, not help. The monk smiled patiently. Let me tell you another story. Once, there was a warrior who returned from battle with a wound that would not heal. He went to many doctors, tried many remedies, but the pain persisted. Finally, he sought out a wise healer who lived in the mountains. The healer examined the wound and said, "The injury itself has long since mended, but you are holding on to the pain because you believe it keeps you vigilant, prevents you from being wounded again. You think that if you relax, if you stop anticipating danger, you will be vulnerable." The warrior realized this was true. He had become so identified with his alertness, his readiness for threat, that he could not imagine existing without it. The healer taught him slowly to thank his pain for trying to protect him, and then to gently explain that the war was over. He needed protection no longer. Slowly, over time, the pain released its grip. "So, I should thank my stress?" Kenji asked, struggling to understand how gratitude could apply to something so unpleasant. "Yes," the monk affirmed. "Resistance creates persistence. When you hate your stress, fight against it, wish it away with anger and frustration, you actually give it more power. You create an internal war, which generates more stress. But when you can pause and say, 'Thank you for trying to keep me safe. I appreciate your intention, but I am actually safe in this moment,' something shifts. You create space for the stress to relax its hold." The monk stood and walked to a low table where a tea kettle sat warming on a small brazier. He prepared 2 cups of tea with movements so deliberate and present that the simple act became a meditation itself. Every gesture was complete, nothing rushed or overlooked. He offered a cup to Kenji, and they drank in companionable silence, the bitter green tea a medicine for both body and spirit. "The third practice I will teach you," the monk said after some time, "is the practice of radical acceptance. This is perhaps the most challenging teaching and the most liberating. It is the understanding that peace is not found in changing your circumstances, but in changing your relationship to your circumstances. You have been living as though your peace is conditional, dependent on everything being a certain way. When things go as planned, you feel briefly satisfied. When they do not, you suffer. This is an exhausting way to live, because life will never conform completely to your preferences." Kenji felt a resistance rise in him. But surely there are things worth striving to change. Should I just accept injustice, failure, suffering? That sounds like giving up. "No," the monk said firmly but kindly. "There is a difference between acceptance and resignation. Resignation says, 'Nothing matters, I am powerless, why bother?' It is passive and despairing. Acceptance says, 'This is what is true right now. I see it clearly, without the distortion of wishing it were otherwise. From this place of clear seeing, I can respond wisely.' Acceptance is active and empowered. It is not giving up. It is giving up the exhausting pretense that reality should be other than it is." He continued, his words flowing like the tea from pot to cup. "When you resist what is, you split your energy. Part of you is dealing with reality, and part of you is fighting with the fact that this is reality. This internal conflict drains you. But when you practice acceptance, all of your energy becomes available for wise action. You stop wasting strength on wishing the situation were different, and you direct all your power toward responding skillfully to what actually exists." Kenji sat with this teaching, turning it over in his mind like a stone whose true shape only reveals itself through patient examination. How do I practice this acceptance when everything in me wants to resist? You start small, the monk advised. You do not begin by accepting life-altering challenges. You begin with this moment, the temperature of the air, the sound of the bamboo outside, the taste of the tea. These are things already happening. Can you stop arguing with them? Can you let them be exactly as they are? This is the training ground. Right now, you are sitting on a cushion in a temple. This is undeniably true. Can you accept this reality completely, without wishing you were somewhere else, without guilt about what you are not doing, without anxiety about what comes next? Can you be fully here? Kenji tried. He noticed the impulse to check his phone, to calculate how much work time he was losing, to worry about consequences. He noticed these impulses without acting on them. He felt the cushion beneath him, heard the wind and birds, saw the play of light on the wooden floor. For just a moment, perhaps 3 seconds of undefended presence, he experienced pure acceptance. It was not dramatic or ecstatic. It was simply a quiet okayness with what was. And in that brief window, he noticed something remarkable. In that moment of acceptance, there was no stress at all. The monk observed the subtle shift in Kenji's posture, the slight softening around his eyes, and nodded with satisfaction. "You see," he said gently, "even 3 seconds of true presence is a victory. 3 seconds becomes 5, then 10, then a minute. Not all at once, but gradually, like the dawn that does not announce itself with thunder, but simply grows brighter until day has arrived, and you cannot remember the exact moment darkness became light." Keiji opened his eyes, and something in his gaze had changed. The desperate edge had softened, replaced by a quiet curiosity. "Master, I am beginning to understand something. I have been approaching my life as a series of problems to solve, obstacles to overcome. I wake already in battle mode. But what if life is not actually a problem? What if my perception is the problem?" "Ah," the monk said, delight evident in his voice. "Now you are asking the right questions." This brings us to the 4th practice, questioning your thoughts. Most people believe that their thoughts are true, accurate reflections of reality. If they think, "I am overwhelmed," they assume this is an objective fact rather than an interpretation. If they think, "I must do everything perfectly, or I will fail," they accept this as truth rather than recognizing it as a belief, and a very painful one at that. The monk set down his teacup and folded his hands in his lap. There was once a student who came to her teacher in great distress. She said, "Master, I am a terrible person. I have so many flaws, so many weaknesses. I try to be better, but I constantly fail. What should I do?" The teacher looked at her thoughtfully and asked, "Is this true? Are you really a terrible person? Can you absolutely know this is true?" The student paused, confused. "Well, I make mistakes. I disappoint people sometimes." The teacher nodded. "Yes, you make mistakes. All humans do. But does making mistakes make you terrible? Is that actually true? Or is that a story you tell yourself? And who would you be without that story?" Kenji leaned forward, engaged. What did she realize? She realized that she had been believing a thought without questioning it, and that thought had been creating enormous suffering. When she examined it closely, she could not find any absolute proof that she was terrible. She found only evidence that she was human, imperfect, learning. The thought, "I am terrible," was not truth. It was a habit of mind, perhaps learned in childhood, perhaps absorbed from a culture that demands perfection. Once she saw this clearly, the thought lost its power over her. The monk continued, "So I invite you to examine your stressful thoughts in this way. When you think, 'I do not have enough time,' is this absolutely true? You have exactly the amount of time that exists. The truth is that you have conflicting desires about how to use your time, and you are stressed by trying to fit more than is possible into each day. But the thought, 'I do not have enough time,' creates a feeling of panic and scarcity. The reality is simply that choices must be made about priorities." Kenji felt something crack open inside him, a realization that was both unsettling and liberating. How many of his thoughts had he been accepting as undeniable facts when they were actually interpretations, stories, beliefs? How much of his stress came not from his circumstances, but from the way he was thinking about his circumstances? This is not to say that thoughts are meaningless, or that reality does not matter, the monk clarified, reading the question forming on Kenji's face. It is to say that there is always a difference between what is happening and the story you tell yourself about what is happening. The event and your interpretation of the event are not the same thing. When you can see this distinction, you gain tremendous freedom. You realize you have more choice than you thought. They sat together as the morning stretched toward midday. The temple bell rang once, its tone deep and resonant, seeming to vibrate in Kenji's chest long after the sound faded. The monk said, "Now you have learned 4 practices: conscious breathing, body awareness, radical acceptance, and questioning thoughts. These are tools you can use anywhere, anytime. You do not need a temple or a monk. You do not need special circumstances. You need only the willingness to pause, to bring awareness to your present moment experience." "But what about when I return to my regular life?" Kenji asked, a note of worry creeping back into his voice. "In here, with you, in this peaceful place, these teachings make sense. But out there, in the chaos, how do I remember? How do I practice when everything is pulling at me?" The monk stood and gestured for Kenji to follow him. They walked out of the meditation hall and into the courtyard, where monks were engaged in various activities. One swept the path with slow, mindful strokes. Another tended a small garden, pulling weeds with complete attention. A young monk sat on the temple steps, polishing a bell with such focus that the act seemed sacred. "You see these monks?" the elder said. "They are not separate from the chaos of life. They have duties, responsibilities, challenges. The temple needs maintaining. Food must be prepared. Conflicts arise between people, even in spiritual communities. They experience sickness, loss, difficulty, but they have trained themselves to bring presence to each activity. Sweeping is not something to rush through to get to something better. Sweeping is the practice itself. Each stroke of the broom is an opportunity for awareness, for being fully alive in this moment." "This is the 5th practice," the monk continued, "transforming ordinary activities into meditation. You do not need to sit on a cushion for hours each day. Though regular formal practice is valuable, you need to bring the quality of presence into whatever you are doing. Washing dishes, walking to a meeting, waiting in line. These are not interruptions to your spiritual life. They are your spiritual life." Kenji watched the monks move through their tasks with a grace that seemed almost impossible to him. Every gesture appeared deliberate, complete, unrushed. "But how?" he asked. "How do they maintain that presence when there is so much to do? Do they never feel rushed or overwhelmed?" The monk chuckled softly. "Of course they do. They are human. But they have learned something essential. Rushing through this moment to get to the next moment is a form of sleepwalking through life. You spend your whole life waiting for some future moment when you can finally relax, finally be at peace. But that moment never arrives, because when you reach it, you are already thinking about the next thing. You have trained yourself to live perpetually in the future, and so the present moment, the only moment you actually have, slips by unnoticed." He gestured to the monk sweeping the path. "Watch him. He is not thinking about finishing the sweeping so he can move on to something else. He is not mentally rehearsing his next conversation or reviewing his last one. He is simply sweeping. The brush touches the stone, dust moves, the path becomes clean. This is enough. This is everything. When he finishes sweeping, he will move to his next task with the same quality of attention. This is not about doing less. It is about being fully present for what you are doing." They walked through the garden, and the monk paused by a small pond where koi fish moved through the water like living jewels. "Let me tell you about a farmer who came to a Zen master seeking peace. The farmer complained that his life was full of problems. If the rains came too much, his crops flooded. If they came too little, the crops withered. If the harvest was good, prices fell because everyone had abundance. If the harvest was poor, he struggled to feed his family. How can I find peace?" he asked, "when life presents an endless stream of difficulties?" The master looked at the farmer with compassion and said, "I am sorry, but I cannot help you with those problems. Everyone has problems like that. Life is full of difficulties. That will never change." The farmer was shocked. "Then what good is Zen? What good is all this practice?" The master smiled and replied, "Zen will not eliminate your problems, but it will help you with the real problem." "What is the real problem?" the farmer asked. "The real problem," the master said, "is that you think you should not have problems." Kenji felt the words land like stones dropping into still water, creating ripples that spread through his understanding. How much of his stress came from this fundamental argument with reality? He expected life to be smooth, predictable, manageable. He expected to be able to control outcomes. And when reality inevitably disappointed these expectations, he suffered. Not from the circumstances themselves, but from his resistance to them. "This is the sixth practice," the monk said, "accepting that life includes difficulty, not as punishment, not as evidence that something is wrong with you or your life, but simply as part of being human. You will face challenges, you will experience loss, you will feel physical and emotional pain. You will have days when everything seems to go wrong. This is not a bug in the system. This is the system. The question is not how to eliminate difficulty, but how to meet it without adding unnecessary suffering through resistance." They sat by the pond, watching the fish glide through the water, occasionally rising to snap at insects on the surface. The monk continued, "There is a teaching. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Pain is the physical sensation, the difficult circumstance, the loss you experience. Suffering is what you add to pain through your thoughts about the pain. You take the pain and multiply it by thinking, 'This should not be happening. Why me? This is unfair. I cannot handle this. This will never end.' Do you see the difference?" "I think so," Kenji said slowly. "Pain is what happens. Suffering is the story I tell myself about what happens." "Exactly," the monk affirmed. "When you touch a hot stove, you feel pain. This is useful information that protects you. But if you then spend the next hour thinking, 'I am so stupid for touching that stove. What is wrong with me? I always do careless things. My life is a mess because I cannot even pay attention to simple things,' you have transformed a momentary pain into extended suffering. The pain ended when you removed your hand from the stove. The suffering continues because of your thoughts. So the practice is to feel the pain without creating the story around it?" Kenji asked, beginning to grasp the teaching at a deeper level. "Yes," the monk confirmed. "This requires tremendous courage and presence. It is much easier to distract yourself, to numb yourself, to create elaborate stories about your pain, than it is to simply feel it directly, cleanly, without elaboration. But when you can do this, something remarkable happens. The pain moves through you and dissolves much more quickly. It is like a wave in the ocean. If you do not resist it, it rises, crests, and falls away naturally. But if you tense against it, trying to stop it or fight it, you get tumbled in the surf." The afternoon sun slanted across the courtyard, casting long shadows. Time had passed without Kenji noticing, and for the first time in months, he had not been constantly checking his phone or calculating minutes lost. He had simply been here, in this moment, receiving these teachings. And strangely, the urgent pressure that usually consumed him had faded to a distant whisper. The monk stood, signaling that it was time to continue. "Come," he said, "there is more to show you. The practices I have shared are the foundation, but now I want to teach you about the nature of the mind itself, why it creates stress, and how to work with it compassionately." They walked to another section of the temple grounds, where a small waterfall cascaded over mossy rocks into a shallow pool. The sound of falling water created a natural symphony, each droplet contributing to the whole. The monk settled onto a flat rock and invited Kenji to sit beside him. For a long moment, they simply listened, allowing the water's music to fill the space between them. "Your mind," the monk began, "is like this waterfall. Thoughts flow constantly. An endless cascade of images, words, memories, plans, judgments, and commentary. From the moment you wake until you sleep, and even in sleep through dreams, the mind generates content ceaselessly. Most people identify completely with this flow of thought. They believe they are their thoughts. When a worried thought arises, they say, "I am anxious." When an angry thought appears, they say, "I am angry." But this is a mistake. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which thoughts appear. Kenji furrowed his brow, trying to grasp this distinction. If I am not my thoughts, then what am I? That, the monk said with a gentle smile, is the ultimate question, is it not? Some spend lifetimes exploring it. But for our purposes today, I will offer this. You are the space of awareness that knows you are thinking. Right now, you are hearing my words. Something in you is aware of these words. That awareness is more fundamental than the content of the words themselves. It is the screen on which the movie of your life plays, but it is not the movie itself. The monk picked up a small stone and tossed it into the pool. Ripples spread across the surface, distorting the reflection of the sky. Watch what happens. The stone creates a disruption, the water responds, and gradually the ripples fade and stillness returns. Your thoughts are like these stones being constantly tossed into the pool of your mind. Each thought creates ripples, emotional reactions, physical sensations, more thoughts in response. But if you can rest as the pool itself, rather than being caught in the ripples, you discover a profound peace that exists beneath all the surface disturbances. This is the seventh practice, he continued, learning to disidentify from your thoughts. You do this through a simple technique. When a thought arises, rather than immediately believing it or following its logic, you note it with a prefix. I am having the thought that. For example, instead of I am overwhelmed, you notice, I am having the thought that I am overwhelmed. This small shift creates space between you and the thought. You begin to see thoughts as mental events rather than truth. Kenji tried this technique with a worry that had been hovering at the edge of his awareness all day. Instead of thinking, I am going to disappoint my team by being absent, he framed it as, I am having the thought that I am going to disappoint my team. Immediately, he felt something loosen. The thought did not disappear, but it lost some of its compelling urgency. It became one possibility among many rather than an undeniable fact. Good, the monk said, observing the shift in Kenji's expression. You are beginning to see. Now, understand this. Your mind is not your enemy. Many spiritual teachings speak of the mind as something to overcome or transcend, but this creates yet another conflict. Your mind is a tool, like your hands or your eyes. It is tremendously useful for planning, solving problems, creating, analyzing. The difficulty arises when the tool runs constantly without your conscious direction, when you cannot turn it off. He gestured to the waterfall. Imagine if this waterfall flowed every moment of every day without pause. The constant flow would eventually erode the rocks, muddy the pool, and create chaos. But nature is wise. Rain comes and goes. The water ebbs and flows with seasons. There is balance between activity and rest. Your mind needs the same balance. It needs periods of active thinking, and it needs periods of rest. Most people never give their minds rest. They wake thinking, spend the day thinking, go to sleep thinking. No wonder they are exhausted. So the practice is to give the mind rest, Kenji asked. But how? You said yourself thoughts flow constantly. They do, the monk acknowledged, but you can change your relationship to them. This is the eighth practice, the practice of non-engagement. When you sit in meditation and a thought arises, you have a choice. You can engage with it, following its trail, adding to it, building a story around it, or you can simply let it pass by without grabbing onto it. Think of your mind as a sky and thoughts as clouds passing through. You do not need to stop the clouds from appearing. You simply rest as the sky, letting them drift by without holding on to them. The monk stood and walked to the edge of the pool, crouching down to trail his fingers through the water. Let me tell you about a student who struggled greatly with her busy mind. She would sit to meditate and be immediately bombarded with thoughts. She tried to push them away, but they only came back stronger. She felt like a failure at meditation. So she went to her teacher and said, "I cannot meditate. My mind is too busy. Everyone else seems peaceful, but I am chaos." The teacher asked her, "Do you see these waves on the pond?" She nodded. "Are the waves separate from the pond?" the teacher asked. "No," she replied. "They are the pond's surface moving." "Exactly," the teacher said. "Your thoughts are not separate from your mind. They are not invaders to fight off. They are your mind's natural activity. Stop trying to create a thoughtless mind. Instead, learn to rest in the awareness that observes thoughts without being disturbed by them. The ocean's surface may be turbulent, but the depths remain still." Kenji felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had been approaching meditation as another task to master, another thing to be perfect at. But perhaps that was the wrong orientation entirely. Perhaps it was not about achieving some special state, but about learning to be at peace with whatever state arose. The afternoon light had taken on the golden quality of late day, and shadows stretched long across the temple grounds. The monk led Kenji to a small tea house where they could rest and continue their conversation in comfort. Inside, tatami mats covered the floor, and a simple scroll hung in an alcove, its calligraphy depicting a single character. Now, as they settled in, the monk prepared tea again, his movements unhurried and precise. "We have been together for several hours," he observed, "and you have learned many practices. But practices alone are not enough. You must also understand what keeps you trapped in stress, what patterns of mind perpetuate your suffering. This is important, because without this understanding, you will practice mechanically, treating these teachings like another self-improvement technique, rather than a true transformation of how you relate to life." He poured the tea, the liquid steaming gently in ceramic cups. The root of most stress is the illusion of separation. You experience yourself as separate from life, separate from others, separate from this moment. You are here, but you want to be there. You are this, but you want to be that. This fundamental sense of separation creates a constant state of lack, of not enough, of incompleteness. And from this feeling of lack comes endless striving, comparing, judging, and suffering. Kenji sipped his tea thoughtfully. "But I am separate. I am myself, distinct from others, distinct from the world." This seems obvious. At one level, yes, the monk agreed. You have a distinct body, a distinct personality, a distinct life story. But at a deeper level, this separation is an illusion. Everything you call you is actually made up of elements that came from outside you. The food you ate, now your body. The ideas you learned, now your thoughts. The love you received, now your capacity to love. Where do you end and the world begins? The boundary is not as clear as it seems. He continued, "More importantly, this sense of separation creates a feeling of being pitted against life, as though you are in a battle for survival and success against forces that oppose you. From this mindset, everything becomes a potential threat or opportunity. You are constantly evaluating, is this good for me or bad for me? Will this help me or hurt me? Does this person like me or reject me?" This endless evaluation is exhausting. It is the ninth practice, recognizing your interconnection with all of life and relaxing the vigilant defending of a separate self. "How do I recognize interconnection?" Kenji asked. "This feels very abstract." The monk gestured around them. "Right now, you are breathing air that was breathed by trees. You are drinking tea that was nourished by rain. You are sitting in a building created by many hands, wearing clothes woven by people you will never meet. Your thoughts are shaped by language that evolved over thousands of years, by culture passed down through generations. Your very ability to feel stress is a gift from ancestors, whose survival depended on being alert to danger. You are not separate. You are a moment in an endless web of relationships, an expression of the whole universe in human form. When you truly feel this, he said, his voice taking on a reverent quality, something relaxes. The burden of being a separate self trying to control everything, manage everything, perfect everything, becomes lighter. You realize you are not the author of your life so much as a participant in it. Things happen through you as much as to you. This does not mean you have no agency or responsibility. It means you hold your agency more lightly, with less grasping and more trust. The monk paused to refill their cups. Let me share another story. There was once a woman who carried tremendous stress about her work. She was a healer, a doctor, and she felt personally responsible for every patient's outcome. When someone recovered, she felt briefly satisfied. When someone's condition worsened or they died, she was devastated, plagued by guilt and self-doubt. She came to a Zen master seeking help for her growing despair. The master listened to her story and then asked, "Do you believe you are the one who heals people?" She replied, "I use my skills and knowledge to heal them." The master shook his head. "You facilitate healing, but the body heals itself. The body knows how to mend a broken bone, how to fight infection, how to restore balance. You create conditions that support this natural healing, but you do not do the healing. When you take credit for recovery and blame for death, you are claiming a power you do not have. Do your work with full dedication and skill, but surrender the outcome. It is not yours to control." Kenji felt the relevance of this story to his own situation. I do the same thing in my work. When projects succeed, I feel briefly good. When they fail or face setbacks, I blame myself entirely. I take every outcome personally. "Yes," the monk confirmed. "This is a common trap. You are confusing responsibility with control. You are responsible for your effort, your integrity, your care, your wisdom, but you cannot control outcomes. Too many factors beyond your influence shape results. Your client's decision depends on their budget, their fears, their needs you know nothing about. Your colleague's response depends on their mood, their history, their own struggles. You can influence outcomes, but you cannot guarantee them. When you try to control what is uncontrollable, you create immense stress." The 10th practice, then, the monk said, is surrendering control while maintaining responsibility. You do everything you can. You give your best effort. You act with integrity. And then you release the outcome. You trust that things will unfold as they must, and you will respond to whatever arises. This is not passivity. It is wisdom. It is understanding the difference between what you can change and what you cannot. Evening was approaching, and through the open door of the tea house, Kenji could see the sky beginning to shift from blue to shades of amber and rose. The temple bell rang again, marking the transition from day to night, its resonant tone seeming to hang in the air like a physical presence. "There is something else you must understand," the monk said, his voice taking on a more intimate quality. "All these practices I have shared with you, they are useful, but they are not the ultimate teaching. The ultimate teaching is simpler and more difficult than any practice. It is this: let go." "Let go of what?" Kenji asked. "Everything," the monk replied simply. "Let go of trying to control life. Let go of needing things to be different than they are. Let go of your ideas about who you should be. Let go of your past mistakes and future worries. Let go of your need to understand everything, to figure everything out, to be certain. Just let go." Kenji felt a mixture of confusion and something like fear. If I let go of everything, what is left? Won't I become passive, unmotivated, disconnected? The monk smiled, a smile that seemed to hold both compassion and a mischievous knowing. This is what everyone fears. They think letting go means giving up, becoming numb, losing themselves. But the opposite is true. When you let go of all the tight holding, all the controlling and managing and protecting, what remains is your true nature, And your true nature is not the exhausted, stressed, overwhelmed person you have been experiencing. That is just accumulated tension and habit. Underneath all that is a fundamental okayness, a basic peace that does not depend on circumstances. He stood and walked to the doorway, gazing out at the darkening sky. Let me tell you about the 11th practice, which is the practice of letting go. It is both simple and profound. Throughout your day, you notice when you are holding, grasping, clenching, controlling. Maybe it is physical, your jaw tight, your shoulders raised, your breath shallow. Maybe it is mental, rehearsing conversations, trying to figure out solutions, worrying about outcomes. Maybe it is emotional, holding on to resentment, clinging to desires, pushing away discomfort. When you notice this holding, you simply practice letting go. You do not need to know how, you just set the intention. Let go, and something in you knows how to do it. Sometimes, he continued, it helps to visualize. Imagine your stress is like holding a handful of sand. The tighter you grip it, the more it slips through your fingers. But when you open your hand completely, the sand simply rests there, held without holding. This is the paradox of letting go. When you stop grasping, you actually have more rather than less. Kenji tried this as he sat there in the tea house. He noticed the tension in his shoulders and consciously let them drop. He noticed his mind rehearsing what he would say to his colleagues about his absence, and consciously released that train of thought. He noticed his worry about whether he was doing this practice correctly, and let that go too. With each small release, he felt incrementally lighter, as though he were setting down weights he had not realized he was carrying. Good, the monk said quietly. You are beginning to understand. Now, there is something important to know about this path of releasing stress and finding peace. It is not linear. You will not learn these practices once and be forever free of stress. There will be days when you forget everything I have taught you. Days when you are completely caught in worry, tension, and fear. Days when you react instead of responding, when you resist instead of accepting. This is not failure. This is being human. The 12th practice, he said, is compassion for yourself. When you notice you are stressed, when you catch yourself in old patterns, the first response must not be self-judgment. Do not add the stress of being stressed about being stressed. Instead, meet yourself with kindness. Place a hand on your heart and speak to yourself as you would to a beloved friend who is struggling. This is difficult. You are doing your best. It is okay to feel what you are feeling. This simple act of self-compassion can transform your experience. The monk returned to sit across from Kenji. You see, many people approach stress relief as another project to perfect. They try to be perfectly calm, perfectly present, perfectly accepting. And when they inevitably fall short, they judge themselves harshly, creating more stress in their attempt to eliminate stress. This is the trap. The path of peace is not about perfection. It is about progress, about gentle persistence, about returning again and again to presence and awareness, no matter how many times you drift away. There was a student, the monk said, who practiced meditation for many years, but felt she was making no progress. She still experienced stress, still got angry, still felt fear and doubt. She went to her teacher feeling defeated and said, I have been practicing for so long, but I am still the same. Nothing has changed. The teacher asked, when you notice you are stressed, what happens? She replied, I remember to breathe, to come back to the present moment. The teacher smiled. And before you began practicing, what happened when you were stressed? She thought for a moment. I would just spiral into it, becoming more and more overwhelmed without any awareness that I had a choice. The teacher nodded. Then everything has changed. You now have awareness and choice where before you had only reaction. This is the fruit of practice, not the absence of stress, but the presence of awareness within stress. Kenji felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, though he could not name exactly why. Something in him was releasing, a long-held armor of perfectionism and self-criticism that he had not realized he wore. "I have been so hard on myself," he whispered. The monk reached over and gently placed his hand on Kenji's shoulder. "Yes," he said softly. "Most people are. They carry inside them a harsh judge who criticizes every mistake, every flaw, every moment of weakness. This inner critic was probably installed by well-meaning parents, teachers, or society, meant to motivate you to improve. But it has become a tyrant, making you feel never good enough, always falling short. Part of your healing is learning to quiet this harsh voice and replace it with compassionate wisdom." They sat in the growing darkness, the tea house now lit by a single lantern that cast warm shadows on the walls. The monk's voice seemed to emerge from the dimness like a lullaby. "The 13th practice is befriending yourself. You must learn to speak to yourself with the same kindness you would offer a child who is afraid or a friend who is struggling. When you make a mistake, instead of berating yourself, say, 'I did the best I could with the awareness I had in that moment. What can I learn from this?' When you feel inadequate, instead of confirming your unworthiness, say, 'I am enough exactly as I am, even as I continue to grow.'" This is not about denying your flaws or avoiding necessary change, he clarified. It is about creating an internal environment of safety and acceptance from which true change can emerge. You cannot hate yourself into becoming a better person. You cannot criticize yourself into peace. The transformation you seek comes from love, not from punishment. Kenji nodded, absorbing this teaching. The day had been full of revelations, each one building on the previous, creating a structure of understanding that felt both entirely new and strangely familiar, as though he were remembering something he had always known but forgotten. "Master," he said, "you have given me so many practices. 13 so far. How do I remember them all? How do I know which one to use when?" The monk chuckled warmly. "You do not need to remember them all at once, nor do you need to perform them perfectly. They are not separate techniques, but different facets of the same diamond, the diamond of awareness and presence. When you breathe consciously, you are also practicing acceptance. When you question your thoughts, you are also disidentifying from mind. When you practice self-compassion, you are also letting go of control. They weave together, support each other, become a way of being rather than a list of tasks." He continued, "But I will give you a simple framework to make this easier. When you notice stress arising, follow these steps. First, pause. Just stop whatever you are doing for a moment. Second, breathe. Take 3 conscious breaths, feeling the air move in and out. Third, notice. What are you thinking? What are you feeling in your body? What are you resisting? Just observe without judgment. Fourth, ask yourself, what do I need right now? What would be kind? Maybe you need to accept something. Maybe you need to let go. Maybe you need to question a thought. Maybe you just need to be gentle with yourself. Trust that if you pause, breathe, and notice, the right response will emerge. This is the 14th practice, the pause. In the space between stimulus and response, between something happening and your reaction to it, lies your freedom. Most people live on autopilot, reacting instantly to whatever arises. Stress comes, they tighten. Someone criticizes them, they defend. Something goes wrong, they panic. There is no pause, no space, no choice. But when you train yourself to pause, even for a second or two, you create room for wisdom to enter. You can respond rather than react. The monk rose and lit another lantern, bringing more light into the space. Let me tell you a story about the power of the pause. There was once a samurai who was known for his quick temper and fierce combat skills. One day, he sought out a Zen master to learn about heaven and hell. He approached the master and demanded, "Tell me about heaven and hell." The master looked at him disdainfully and said, "Why would I waste my time teaching a crude, filthy warrior like you? You are too ignorant to understand." The samurai was enraged. He drew his sword, ready to strike down this insulting monk, But in that moment, just before his blade fell, the master said calmly, "That is hell." The samurai froze, understanding flooding through him. He was about to commit murder because of wounded pride. He saw his rage clearly, saw where it led. He slowly lowered his sword, bowed deeply to the master, his eyes filled with tears of insight. The master smiled gently and said, "And that is heaven." The samurai had experienced both hell and heaven in the space of a few seconds. Hell being complete identification with reactive emotion, heaven being the awakening of awareness and choice. "Do you see?" the monk asked. "Hell is not some future place of punishment. Hell is living without awareness, enslaved to your reactive patterns. Heaven is not some distant reward. Heaven is the freedom that comes from awareness, from the pause that allows wisdom to emerge. And this heaven is available to you right now, in any moment you choose to pause." Kenji felt the teaching settle into him, like rain soaking into dry earth. How many times had he reacted out of stress, fear, or anger, only to regret it later? How many relationships had he damaged? How many opportunities had he missed? How much unnecessary suffering had he created, simply because he could not pause? And how simple it seemed now, in theory at least, to insert that tiny gap of awareness before responding. "Of course," the monk said, reading the thoughts on Kenji's face. "Simple is not the same as easy. You have been conditioning yourself to react instantly for decades. This patterning runs deep. It will take patient practice to rewire these habitual responses. But each time you manage to pause, even for a breath, you strengthen the neural pathways of awareness. You make it slightly easier the next time." Night had fully arrived now, and through the open door of the tea house, stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The sounds of evening filled the air, crickets singing, the distant hoot of an owl, the soft rustle of leaves moved by a gentle wind. The monk and Kenji sat in comfortable silence for a while, letting the teachings integrate. Finally, the monk spoke again. "There is another dimension to stress that we have not yet addressed directly. It is the relationship between stress and time. Most stress involves either dwelling on the past or worrying about the future. You replay conversations that already happened, wishing you had said something different. You rehearse situations that have not yet occurred, trying to prepare for every contingency. You miss your present moment because you are living in a time that does not exist, a remembered past or an imagined future." The 15th practice, he said, is anchoring in the present moment. This is related to the practices of breathing and body awareness we explored earlier, but it goes deeper. It is cultivating the understanding that this moment, right now, is the only moment you ever actually experience. The past exists only as memory, which is a present moment experience of remembering. The future exists only as imagination, which is a present moment experience of projecting. Everything happens now. Everything. Kenji shifted on his cushion, trying to grasp this concept fully. But planning for the future is necessary, and learning from the past is wise. "Are you saying I should not think about past or future at all?" "Not at all," the monk clarified. "There is a difference between functional use of past and future, and compulsive dwelling in past and future. When you sit down to plan a project, you think about future steps. This is functional. When you review a mistake to extract its lesson, you think about the past. This is wise. But when you replay an embarrassing moment from yesterday for the 100th time, creating shame and regret, this is compulsive dwelling. When you worry about all the things that might go wrong next week, spinning scenarios of disaster, this is compulsive dwelling. This does not serve you. It only creates suffering." The monk stood and walked to the doorway, gazing up at the emerging stars. The mind's tendency to wander into past and future is natural. It evolved to help us learn from experience and plan for challenges. But like many evolutionary adaptations, what once served survival can become a source of suffering in modern life. You must train yourself to use past and future functionally while living primarily in the present. How do I do this? Kenji asked. Through what I call anchor points, the monk explained. These are sensory experiences that can only happen in the present moment, and therefore serve to bring you back when your mind has wandered. Your breath is one anchor point. You can only breathe now. Physical sensations in your body are anchor points. You can only feel them now. The sounds around you, the sights before your eyes, the taste of tea, the feeling of ground beneath you. These are all anchor points. Whenever you notice your mind has drifted into past rumination or future worry, you gently bring your attention back to one of these anchor points. You do not force or fight. You simply return, again and again, training the mind to rest in now. He returned to sit across from Kenji. Let me guide you through a brief practice. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Now, without opening your eyes, tell me 3 things you can hear right now. Kenji listened. I hear crickets. I hear the wind moving through trees. I hear the creak of wood, perhaps the building settling. Good, the monk said. Now, 3 things you can feel physically in this moment. I feel the cushion beneath me. I feel the slight coolness of the air on my hands. I feel my heartbeat. Excellent. Now notice what has happened to the worries that were present a moment ago. Kenji realized with surprise that his mental chatter had completely stopped. For those few moments of attending to sensory experience, his mind had been quiet, present, at peace. They are gone, he said softly. Not gone, the monk corrected gently, but no longer the foreground of your awareness. They may return, and that is fine. But you have just discovered that you have the power to shift your attention away from worrying thoughts and into present moment experience. This is a profound form of freedom. You are not trapped in your thoughts. You are not enslaved to your worries. You have choice about where you place your attention. The monk continued. This is the essence of mindfulness, the quality of being fully present and engaged with whatever is happening right now without judgment. It is a simple concept, but a revolutionary practice. Most people have never experienced 5 minutes of continuous presence. Their attention bounces around like a monkey in a tree, never settling, never still. But with practice, you can train your attention to stabilize, to rest in the present moment for longer and longer periods. And when attention stabilizes, stress naturally decreases. The 16th practice then, he said, is mindfulness in daily life. You can practice formal meditation, sitting quietly and following your breath, and this is valuable. But you can also practice informal mindfulness throughout your day. When you are eating, just eat. Taste your food fully. Feel its texture. Notice the entire sensory experience. When you are walking, just walk. Feel your feet touching the ground, your legs moving, your arms swinging. When you are talking with someone, just listen. Give them your complete attention, not planning your response while they speak. Each of these activities becomes a meditation, a practice of presence. There was a student, the monk said, who asked her teacher, "What is enlightenment?" The teacher replied, "When I am hungry, I eat. When I am tired, I sleep." The student was confused. "But everyone does that. How is that enlightenment?" The teacher smiled. "No, most people do not. When they are eating, they are thinking about work. When they are sleeping, they are worrying about tomorrow. When they are at work, they are wishing they were somewhere else. They are never fully present for the activity they are engaged in. To be completely present, to give yourself fully to each moment, this is enlightenment. It is not some special state. It is simply being awake to your life." Kenji absorbed these words, feeling their truth resonate through his entire being. How much of his life had he missed by being mentally elsewhere? How many meals had he eaten without tasting? How many conversations had he had without truly listening? How many beautiful moments had passed unnoticed because his attention was trapped in worries about past or future. "Master," he said, emotion thickening his voice, "I am beginning to realize how much of my life I have wasted in distraction and worry. I feel regret for all the moments I have missed, all the beauty I have overlooked while caught in my thoughts." The monk's expression softened with compassion. "Ah, now you are creating suffering about having created suffering. Do you see how the mind works? It can make suffering out of anything, even out of recognizing suffering. This is why the 17th practice is essential, the practice of beginning again without judgment. You cannot change the past. All those moments you were not present, they are gone. Regretting them now only means you are not present in this moment either. Instead, you can simply recognize, I have been living on autopilot. Now I am waking up. And then you begin again, fresh, in this moment. Every moment is a new beginning," he continued. "You do not need to carry the weight of your past mistakes, your years of unawareness. Right now, you can choose presence. And now again, and now again. Each breath is a new opportunity. This is the great gift of impermanence. Nothing is fixed. Everything is always changing, which means you are always free to start over." The monk poured more tea, the ritual itself a meditation in presence. There is a related teaching I want to share. It concerns the difference between living in doing mode versus being mode. Most of modern life is organized around doing mode. You are always working toward a goal, trying to get somewhere, achieve something, become someone. There is nothing wrong with having goals and taking action. But if you are always in doing mode, you create perpetual stress, because in doing mode, the present moment is never enough. It is always just a stepping stone to some better future moment. You are always future-oriented, never satisfied with what is, always chasing what could be. Being mode is different, he explained. In being mode, you are not trying to get anywhere or become anything. You are simply present with what is. You are enough. This moment is enough. There is nowhere else you need to be, nothing else you need to do. You can rest in simple being. This does not mean you stop all activity. It means your activity arises from a place of fullness rather than lack, from presence rather than striving. The 18th practice is learning to shift from doing mode to being mode regularly throughout your day. You can set reminders, perhaps a phone alarm every hour, that prompts you to pause and ask, can I shift into being mode right now? Can I stop trying to get somewhere and just be here? Even 30 seconds of pure being mode can restore you, can remind you that you are more than your achievements and productivity, more than your to-do list and goals. Kenji noticed a quality in the monk's presence that embodied this teaching. Even as he spoke, taught, and moved through activities, there was a sense that he was not rushing towards some future moment. He was complete in each action, fully here. It was magnetic, this quality of presence, and Kenji found himself wanting to cultivate it in his own life. There is something else I must share with you, the monk said, his tone becoming more serious. As you practice these teachings and begin to experience more peace, you may encounter resistance from unexpected sources. People around you who are accustomed to your stress and urgency may unconsciously try to pull you back into old patterns. They may criticize your new practices as selfish or impractical. They may feel threatened by your changing, because your change implies they could change too, and they may not be ready to face that possibility. The 19th practice, then, is protecting your peace. This does not mean becoming rigid or defending against all challenges. It means being clear about your commitment to presence and well-being, and not allowing others to sabotage it. It means setting boundaries when necessary, saying no to demands that would deplete you, choosing consciously how you spend your time and energy. You cannot control others' reactions to your growth, but you can remain steady in your commitment to your path. There was a man, the monk said, who began practicing meditation and found great peace in it, but his family mocked him, calling him lazy for sitting still. His colleagues criticized him for being less available, less driven. He began to doubt himself, wondering if he was being selfish to prioritize his practice. He asked his teacher, "Should I give up my practice to keep peace with others?" The teacher asked him, "When you are on an airplane and the oxygen masks drop, what are you instructed to do?" The man replied, "Put your own mask on first before helping others." "Exactly," the teacher said. "You cannot give to others what you do not have yourself. If you abandon your practice, you abandon your peace, and then you have nothing of value to offer anyone." Taking care of your own well-being is not selfish. It is the foundation from which all genuine service flows. Kenji understood this wisdom, but also felt the challenge it presented. His entire identity had been built around being the one others could rely on, the one who sacrificed personal needs for professional demands. Changing this pattern would require courage, not just with others, but with himself, with his own internalized beliefs about what made him valuable and worthy. As if reading his mind, the monk said, "You are valuable not for what you do, but for who you are." This is the 20th practice, recognizing your inherent worth. You do not need to earn your right to exist, to rest, to be at peace. You do not need to prove yourself through endless productivity. Your worth is not conditional on your achievements. It is fundamental, intrinsic, unchanging. The weight of these words settled over Kenji like a warm blanket. His entire life, he had been driven by a belief that he needed to earn his place in the world, that he was only as valuable as his last success. The thought that he might be inherently worthy, regardless of accomplishment, felt both foreign and deeply relieving. "How do I come to believe this?" he asked quietly. "It is one thing to hear it intellectually. It is another to feel it as truth." The monk nodded with understanding. Yes, this is a deep shift, not accomplished through thinking but through direct experience. The practice is this: regularly bring awareness to the part of you that existed before all your accomplishments, before all your failures, before all the stories you tell about yourself. There is a fundamental presence in you, a basic awareness that has been there since you were a child, unchanged despite all the changes of your life. This presence does not need to prove anything. It simply is. When you connect with this essential self, you touch your inherent worth. He guided Kenji through an experiential exercise. Close your eyes. Bring to mind a memory from childhood, something simple, perhaps playing outside or sitting in a familiar room. Remember the feeling of being that child. Now notice. The essence of you that was present in that memory is still present now. Your body has changed. Your knowledge has expanded. Your circumstances are different. But something fundamental has remained constant. This is your true self, your essential nature. It was whole then, and it is whole now. It needs nothing added to it to be complete. Kenji followed the guidance and found himself remembering sitting under a tree in his grandmother's garden, watching ants climb the bark. He was perhaps 7 years old, with no worries about success or failure, no stress about the future, just simple presence with the moment. And somehow, miraculously, he could feel that same quality of consciousness still alive in him now, beneath all the layers of adult worry and responsibility. It was like finding a treasure he had lost long ago. "That child still lives in you," the monk said softly. "That capacity for simple presence, for wonder, for ease. It was not destroyed by adulthood. It was only covered over." These practices are about uncovering what has always been there, not acquiring something new. You are not broken and in need of fixing. You are whole, but have forgotten your wholeness. Stress arises from forgetting. Peace comes from remembering. The evening had grown late, and Kenji realized he had been at the temple for many hours. Yet he felt no urgency to leave, no anxiety about time passing. For the first time in memory, he was content to be exactly where he was, doing exactly what he was doing. The monk seemed to sense this shift and smiled. "You see, you were already experiencing the fruit of these teachings. Your nervous system is beginning to remember its natural state of ease. This is not something you have to create through effort. It is something you allow by releasing effort, by letting go of the constant striving and controlling. Your body knows how to relax if you stop forcing it to remain tense. The monk stood and stretched slowly, his movements fluid despite his age. Come, let us walk in the garden one more time before you must return to your life. There are a few more teachings I wish to share with you. They stepped out into the cool night air, and Kenji was struck by the beauty of the temple grounds in darkness. Lanterns created pools of soft light along the paths, and the moon, nearly full, cast everything in silver. The night flowers had opened, releasing a fragrance both sweet and subtle. Above, the stars blazed with a clarity rarely visible in the city. As they walked, the monk spoke again. The 21st practice is gratitude. This is not superficial positive thinking or denying difficulties. It is the practice of training your attention to notice what is working, what is beautiful, what is gift. The mind has a negativity bias, evolved to scan for threats and problems. This helped our ancestors survive, but in modern life, it means you naturally focus on what is wrong while taking for granted what is right. Consciously practicing gratitude rebalances this bias. Each day, perhaps in the morning or before sleep, take a few moments to acknowledge 3 things you are grateful for. They do not need to be grand. Perhaps you are grateful for a comfortable bed, for clean water, for the birdsong outside your window, for a kind word from a friend. The content matters less than the practice itself, which trains your brain to notice the positive aspects of your life. Over time, this rewires your baseline orientation from lack to abundance, from complaint to appreciation. They paused by the pond where they had sat earlier. Now, in the moonlight, the water was like polished obsidian, reflecting the stars. Gratitude is also an antidote to stress, the monk continued. When you are grateful, you cannot simultaneously be anxious. The 2 states are incompatible. Gratitude brings you into the present moment, into recognition of what is already here, already available. Anxiety lives in the future, in fear of what might happen. When you anchor in gratitude, you anchor in now, in the goodness that exists alongside the difficulty. Let me share a final story, the monk said. There was a woman who lost everything. Her home burned down, her possessions were destroyed. She was left with almost nothing. People expected her to be devastated, and indeed she grieved her losses. But when someone asked her how she could maintain such peace despite her tragedy, she replied, "I lost my house, but I still have my health. I lost my possessions, but I still have my memories. I lost my comforts, but I gained the knowledge that I can survive with very little. I learned that I am not my belongings, and this has brought me a strange freedom. I would not have chosen this lesson, but I will not waste it." This is the transformative power of gratitude. It can find light even in darkness, not by denying the darkness, but by acknowledging what remains despite the loss. Kenji felt moved by this story, recognizing the profound shift in perspective it represented. So much of his stress came from focusing on what was not yet achieved, what might go wrong, what was lacking, what would change if he trained himself to notice what was already present, already working, already sufficient. "There is one more practice I wish to share with you," the monk said, "and then you must return to your life to test these teachings in the real world. The 22nd practice is the practice of loving kindness. This is an ancient meditation that cultivates compassion for yourself and others. It is particularly powerful for those who carry stress related to relationships, to conflict, to judgment of self and others." They sat on a bench overlooking the garden, and the monk explained the practice. You begin by bringing to mind someone you love easily, perhaps a child, a dear friend, a beloved teacher. You feel the natural warmth and care you have for them. Then you silently offer them phrases of well-wishing. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you live with ease. You are not trying to make anything happen. You are simply cultivating the quality of loving kindness in your heart. After you have established this feeling, he continued, you turn it toward yourself. This is often the hardest part for people. You offer yourself the same phrases. May I be happy? May I be healthy? May I be safe? May I live with ease? If resistance arises, if an inner voice says, you do not deserve these wishes, you notice that resistance with compassion and continue anyway. You are training yourself in self-love, in befriending yourself. Then, the monk said, you expand the circle of loving kindness outward, to a neutral person, someone you neither love nor dislike, to a difficult person, someone who has hurt you or whom you have conflict with, and finally, to all beings everywhere, without exception. With each expansion, you offer the same phrases, cultivating a heart that can hold all of life with care. Kenji sat quietly, taking in this teaching. The idea of offering well wishes to someone who had wronged him felt challenging, but he could see the wisdom in it. Carrying resentment and anger only poisoned his own peace. If he could cultivate genuine compassion even for difficult people, he would free himself from the burden of bitterness. This practice, the monk explained, works at multiple levels. On the surface, it softens your relationships and reduces interpersonal stress. At a deeper level, it transforms your fundamental stance toward life from one of judgment and separation to one of connection and care. When you can wish all beings well, including yourself, you no longer carry the exhausting tension of dividing the world into good and bad, friend and enemy, deserving and undeserving. You rest in a more spacious, more peaceful orientation. The temple bell rang 11 times, marking the late hour. The monk turned to Kenji with a warm expression. You have received many teachings today, 22 practices for releasing stress and finding peace. But remember, these are not tasks to perform perfectly. They are invitations to explore, to experiment, to discover what resonates with you. Some practices will become daily companions. Others you may visit only occasionally when needed. Trust your own inner wisdom to guide you. He stood, and Kenji followed suit. They walked slowly toward the temple gate, their time together drawing to a close. One last thing I must tell you, the monk said. You will leave here tonight with insights and intentions, and tomorrow you will return to your busy life. The real practice begins there, not here in this peaceful sanctuary. The challenge is to remember these teachings when you are caught in the storm, not just when you are resting in the calm. To support you, I offer this advice. Create a simple daily structure. Each morning before you engage with the demands of the day, spend even 5 minutes in silence. Sit, breathe, set your intention to be present. Each evening before sleep, review your day without judgment. Notice when you were present and when you were lost. Acknowledge both with compassion. This simple bookending of your day will anchor your practice and help these teachings integrate into your life. They reached the gate, and Kenji bowed deeply to the monk, his heart full of gratitude. Master, I came here this morning drowning in stress, barely holding on. You have given me tools to work with my mind and heart in ways I never imagined. I cannot thank you enough. The monk returned the bow and placed his hand on Kenji's shoulder one final time. The thanks belong to you for being willing to question your habitual patterns, for being open to a different way of relating to your life. Remember, the goal is not to eliminate all stress. Some stress is natural and even helpful. The goal is to transform your relationship with stress so that it does not rule you, so that beneath the surface challenges, you remain connected to an inner peace that is always available. And remember this, he added, his eyes twinkling with knowing humor. When you inevitably forget everything I have taught you, when you find yourself completely caught in stress and overwhelm again, that too is part of the path. You will forget and remember many times. This is not failure. This is the rhythm of practice. Be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself. The way is long, but every step counts. With those parting words, Kenji stepped through the temple gate and back into the world. The city sounds seemed both familiar and somehow different, as though he were hearing them for the first time. He noticed the cool air on his skin, the feeling of his feet meeting the ground with each step. He was already practicing, already different from the man who had stumbled through that gate many hours before. As he walked home through the quiet streets, Kenji reflected on the day's teachings. So much had been offered, so much to integrate, but he did not feel overwhelmed by it. Instead, he felt a quiet confidence that he now had a map for working with his stress, a set of practices that could support him in navigating life's challenges with more grace and less suffering. When Kenji arrived home, it was well past midnight. His apartment, usually a place of restless energy and scattered attention, felt different somehow. The same furniture, the same walls, yet everything seemed softer, less oppressive. He moved through his evening routine with a presence he had not brought to these simple acts in years. Washing his face, he felt the water on his skin. Changing his clothes, he noticed the texture of fabric. Preparing for bed, he was fully engaged with each small task, rather than mentally rehearsing tomorrow's obligations. As he lay down, he remembered the monk's advice about evening reflection. He took a few moments to review his day without judgment. He acknowledged the hours spent at the temple with gratitude. He noticed that even now, part of his mind wanted to spin into worry about the work he had missed, the explanations he would need to give. He watched this tendency with gentle awareness, neither indulging it nor fighting it. Worrying about tomorrow, he noted silently, and brought his attention back to his breath, to the sensation of his body resting on the mattress. For the first time in months, perhaps years, Kenji fell asleep without tossing and turning, without his mind racing through endless loops of anxiety. He simply let go, trusting that tomorrow would unfold as it would, and that he would meet it with whatever resources he had. This simple act of trust, of surrendering control, was itself a profound practice. The next morning, Kenji woke naturally, without the jarring assault of an alarm. For a brief moment, pure awareness was present, without thought or identity. Then slowly, thoughts began to arise. The day ahead, responsibilities waiting. He noticed the familiar contraction beginning in his chest, the old patterns starting to activate. But this time, he remembered. He paused. Sitting up in bed, he took the 5 minutes the monk had suggested for morning practice. He simply sat, breathing, not trying to achieve any special state, but just being present with the experience of this moment. Thoughts came and went. Sounds from the street filtered through the window. His body gradually woke fully, and beneath it all, a quality of okayness, of basic well-being that did not depend on circumstances. When he finally rose and began his day, he moved with more intention. Instead of immediately grabbing his phone to check messages, he went to the window and looked out at the morning light. He made tea and actually tasted it, felt its warmth in his hands. These small acts of presence might seem insignificant, but they were revolutionary for someone who had spent years rushing through life without truly experiencing it. At work, the challenges were exactly as he expected. His colleagues were concerned about his absence, his clients had questions, his inbox was overflowing. The old Kenji would have immediately tightened, gone into crisis mode, tried to control everything at once. But something was different now. He took a breath. He felt his feet on the ground. He acknowledged the reality of the situation without the story that it was catastrophic. "I needed to take some time yesterday," he told his team simply, without elaborate justification. "I am back now, and we will address everything that needs attention." Some colleagues seemed surprised by his calm demeanor. Others seemed relieved that he was not spinning into the usual urgency that tended to elevate everyone's stress. As he worked through the day, Kenji practiced what the monk had taught. When he noticed his jaw clenching, he consciously released it. When he caught himself catastrophizing about a client meeting, he questioned the thought, "Is it absolutely true that this will be a disaster. When he felt overwhelmed by his task list, he paused, took 3 conscious breaths, and asked himself what actually needed to happen next. Just the next right thing, not everything at once. The practices did not eliminate his stress entirely. There were moments when he fell back into old patterns, when he reacted rather than responded, when presence gave way to anxious thinking. But now there was awareness. He could catch himself, sometimes in the moment, sometimes afterward. And each time he caught himself, he practiced self-compassion rather than self-judgment. This is hard. I am learning. It is okay. During his lunch break, instead of working through it as usual, Kenji went outside. He found a small park near his office and sat on a bench, eating his meal mindfully, tasting each bite. He watched people pass by, noticed the play of light through leaves, listened to birds singing in nearby trees. This break, this deliberate shift into being mode, restored him in a way that pushing through never had. That evening, he returned home less depleted than usual. He prepared a simple dinner with attention, the act of cooking becoming a meditation. He ate slowly, without television or phone, just the experience of nourishment. After dinner, he sat for a few minutes in formal practice, following his breath. Then he did the loving-kindness meditation the monk had taught, offering well wishes to himself, to his family, to his colleagues, even to the difficult client who had been the source of much recent stress. As he prepared for sleep, he reflected on the day. He had not been perfect. He had not maintained continuous presence. He had not eliminated stress. But he had been different, responded differently, held his experience with more space and gentleness, and that was enough. That was everything. This became Kenji's new rhythm. Not perfect, not always consistent, but genuinely different from before. Days when he remembered to practice, and days when he forgot. Days when presence came easily, and days when he struggled. But slowly, gradually, the cumulative effect of his practice began to reshape his life. His baseline level of stress decreased, his reactivity softened, his relationships improved as he became more present with others. His work quality actually enhanced as he stopped frantically multitasking and brought focus to one thing at a time. Weeks turned into months, and Kenji continued to visit the temple periodically, sitting with the old monk, deepening his understanding. Each visit revealed new layers of the teachings, showed him how much more there was to explore. But he also realized that the temple, the monk, the formal teachings were supports, not the practice itself. The practice was his life. Every moment, an opportunity to choose presence over distraction, acceptance over resistance, compassion over judgment. One particularly challenging day at work tested everything Kenji had learned. A major project he had been leading for months suddenly faced cancellation due to client budget cuts. The news arrived without warning, via a curt email. His first response was pure reactivity, panic, anger, fear about professional consequences. His chest tightened, his thoughts spiraled, and for several minutes he was completely caught in the stress response. But then, like a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters, he remembered to pause. He closed his laptop, stood up, and walked to the restroom where he could have a moment of privacy. He looked at himself in the mirror and placed his hand on his chest, feeling his racing heart. "This is really difficult," he said quietly to his reflection. "This is painful. It is okay to feel this." The simple act of acknowledging his feelings without judgment began to create space around them. He took several deep breaths, consciously lengthening his exhales to activate his parasympathetic nervous system. He brought awareness to his body, noticing where tension had lodged, his shoulders, his stomach, his jaw. He consciously released what he could. Then he began to question his thoughts. "I am ruined professionally." Was that absolutely true? No. He had other projects, other client relationships, a solid track record. This was a setback, not a catastrophe. This should not have happened. Was that true? The client had budget constraints. This was an understandable business decision, not a personal attack or some cosmic injustice. The situation was disappointing, certainly, but his thoughts were making it worse than it needed to be. After about 10 minutes of working with his experience in this way, Kenji felt different. Still disappointed, still concerned about implications, but no longer drowning in panic. He had created enough space to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. He returned to his desk and began to address the situation practically, informing his team, exploring whether any aspects of the project could be salvaged, considering what could be learned from the experience. Later, when he shared this story with the monk during his next visit, the elder smiled with deep satisfaction. You see, this is the fruit of practice, not the absence of difficulty, but the ability to meet difficulty without losing yourself. You experienced a genuine challenge, felt the appropriate emotions, but did not add unnecessary suffering through catastrophic thinking. You used your tools. This is wisdom. The monk continued, there is something important to understand about the spiritual path. Many people imagine that enlightenment or peace means feeling blissful all the time, never being troubled by anything. But this is a misunderstanding. True peace is not about your external circumstances or even your emotional state. It is about the unshakable awareness that can hold all experiences, pleasant and unpleasant, easy and difficult, without being destroyed by them. You are not trying to become someone who never feels stress, never faces challenges, never experiences disappointment. You are learning to be someone who can experience all of these things while remaining connected to a fundamental okayness. This is the difference between being weather and being the sky. The weather changes constantly: sunny, stormy, calm, turbulent. But the sky holds all weather without being changed by it. Your essential nature is like the sky, vast enough to contain all the weather of your human experience. These words resonated deeply with Kenji. He had indeed been unconsciously trying to become someone who never felt stress, as though stress were a sign of failure. But he was beginning to understand that the goal was different, not invulnerability, but resilience. Not the absence of difficulty, but the capacity to work skillfully with difficulty when it arose. There is another layer to this teaching, the monk said. It relates to what we might call the dark night of practice. As you continue walking this path, you may encounter periods where everything seems harder rather than easier, where you become more aware of your patterns and flaws rather than less. This can be discouraging. Some people abandon their practice at this point, thinking it is not working, but actually, this is a sign of progress. When you first begin to practice awareness, he explained, you are like someone lighting a candle in a dark room. Suddenly you can see things you could not see before: the dust, the clutter, the cobwebs in the corners. The room has not gotten dirtier. Your ability to see has improved. Similarly, as your awareness grows, you become conscious of patterns and reactions that were always there but operating below your conscious awareness. This increased visibility can feel uncomfortable, but it is necessary for transformation. You cannot change what you cannot see. Kenji recognized this experience. In recent weeks, he had become acutely aware of how often he operated from fear, how much of his behavior was driven by a need for approval, how many of his thoughts were harsh judgments of himself and others. Sometimes this awareness felt like too much, like he was becoming more neurotic rather than more peaceful. This is where the practice of compassion becomes essential, the monk said, as though reading Kenji's mind. As you see your patterns more clearly, you must meet what you see with kindness rather than criticism. You are not discovering that you are flawed. You are discovering that you are human. Every person carries fear, seeks approval, judges themselves and others. These are not unique failures. They are universal human experiences. The practice is not to eradicate them, but to hold them with awareness and compassion. Let me tell you about a student who came to her teacher in distress, the monk continued. She said, I have been practicing meditation for 2 years, and I am more aware than ever of my anger, my jealousy, my selfishness. I thought practice was supposed to make me a better person, but I seem to be getting worse. The teacher smiled and said, Let me ask you something. 2 years ago when you felt angry, what did you do? She replied, I would lash out at others, say hurtful things, act on my anger without thinking. The teacher nodded. And now, when you feel angry, what do you do? She thought for a moment. Now I notice the anger. I feel it in my body. I watch the thoughts it creates. Sometimes I still act on it, but less often, and when I do, I catch myself more quickly. The teacher smiled. And you think you are not making progress? This story illuminated something important for Kenji. He had been measuring progress by whether he felt stress, rather than by how he related to the stress when it arose. By that measure, he had actually made tremendous progress. He was still a human being with a nervous system that responded to challenges, but he was no longer at the mercy of those responses. He had space, choice, awareness. The path of practice, the monk said, is not linear. It is more like a spiral. You revisit the same issues, the same patterns, the same challenges, but each time at a deeper level of understanding. You may think you are going in circles, but you are actually ascending, seeing familiar territory from higher perspective. Each revolution of the spiral brings new insight. He poured tea for both of them, the ritual familiar and comforting now. There is something else I want to teach you about working with stress. We have talked mostly about mental and emotional practices. But stress also has a strong physical component that we must not neglect. Your body holds memory of every stress you have experienced. This stored tension can perpetuate stress, even when your mind is relatively calm. The practice of working with the body is essential, he continued. Some people benefit from yoga, some from Tai Chi, some from simple stretching or walking in nature. The specific form matters less than the quality of attention you bring to physical movement. You are not exercising to achieve a perfect body. You are moving to release held tension, to bring awareness into your physical form, to re-establish the mind-body connection that stress has severed. Kenji recognized the truth of this. Despite his meditation practice, he often felt tightness in his shoulders and lower back, places where stress seemed to lodge physically. The monk suggested a simple practice. Each evening, spend 5 minutes doing gentle stretching while breathing consciously, inviting each area of the body to release tension. Also, the monk added, never underestimate the importance of rest. Modern culture glorifies busyness and productivity, treating rest as laziness. But rest is not the absence of productivity. Rest is its own activity, essential for health, creativity, and well-being. When you rest fully, without guilt, you allow your nervous system to recalibrate, your mind to integrate learning, your body to repair itself. Quality rest is one of the most powerful antidotes to chronic stress. But true rest requires something difficult. Stopping, he said. Not just pausing briefly between tasks, but actually stopping. Setting aside time where you are not productive, not accomplishing anything, not even practicing meditation as another task on your list. Just being, without agenda. This is profoundly countercultural and therefore profoundly healing. Kenji realized that he had been treating even his meditation practice as another item on his productivity list, another thing to do correctly. The monk's invitation to sometimes just rest, without any agenda at all, felt both appealing and slightly terrifying. His identity had been so wrapped up in doing that the prospect of not doing felt like becoming no one. Exactly, the monk said when Kenji expressed this fear. You have identified so strongly with your roles, as worker, as provider, as achiever, that you have forgotten the being beneath all the doing. Who are you when you are not performing any role? This is what rest reveals. At first it may feel uncomfortable, even boring. Your mind will want to fill the space with activity. But if you persist, If you allow yourself periods of true rest, you begin to contact a deeper sense of self that is not defined by achievement. They sat in companionable silence, drinking their tea. Outside, the afternoon light had that particular quality that signals autumn deepening toward winter. Leaves had turned brilliant colors, and there was a crispness in the air. Change was constant, Kenji reflected. The seasons turned, life circumstances shifted, nothing remained static. And yet, here in this moment, drinking tea with this wise old monk, there was also something unchanging, a stillness beneath all the flux. You are experiencing what we call the eternal now, the monk observed. Past seasons have come and gone. Future seasons will arrive. But in this moment, it is this season, this temperature, this quality of light. When you rest deeply in the present moment, you touch something that is outside of time, while being completely immersed in time. This is a paradox that cannot be understood intellectually, but can be experienced directly. As their visit drew to a close, the monk offered one more reflection. You have learned so much in these months, but learning is never complete. The teachings we have explored, the 22 practices and countless other insights, these are just pointers, fingers pointing at the moon. The moon itself is your own direct experience of peace, of presence, of your true nature. Do not mistake the pointer for what it points to. Eventually, you must put down even these teachings and simply be. The greatest teaching, he said, is your own life. Every moment, whether pleasant or painful, is showing you something about the nature of reality, about who you are, about how to live with wisdom. Stay curious, stay open, let life teach you, and trust that you have within you everything you need to meet whatever arises. Walking back through the city after leaving the temple, Kenji felt a deep gratitude for the monk's guidance. But he also recognized the truth of the teacher's words. Ultimately, the practice was his own, the discoveries his own, the transformation his own. The monk could point the way, but Kenji had to walk the path himself. He noticed as he walked that his relationship with the city had changed. The noise that once agitated him now seemed like a symphony of human activity. The crowds that once felt oppressive now felt like the pulsing vitality of life. He was not separate from this city, fighting against it. He was part of it, moving through it, another note in its constant song. That evening, Kenji did something unusual. Instead of filling his time with work or entertainment, he simply sat by his window and watched the sky change colors as the sun set. He did nothing, achieved nothing, and it was enough. He was enough. This moment was enough. As winter approached and the year moved toward its close, Kenji continued to deepen his practice. Some days were easier than others. Some days he felt connected to presence and peace. Other days he felt as stressed and scattered as ever. But even on the difficult days, something fundamental had shifted. He knew now that stress was not the enemy, that his thoughts were not truth, that beneath everything was a basic okayness that circumstances could not touch. He began to notice how his transformation affected those around him. Colleagues commented that he seemed calmer, more centered. His decisions at work became clearer because he was not making them from a place of fear and reactivity. Relationships improved because he was actually present with people rather than mentally elsewhere. Even his sleep, which had been troubled for years, became more restful. But perhaps the most significant change was internal. The harsh inner critic that had driven him mercilessly for decades had softened, not disappeared. It still arose with its judgments and demands, but it no longer ruled him. When it appeared, he could recognize it, thank it for trying to protect him, and choose not to believe its harsh assessments. In its place, a gentler inner voice was emerging, one that spoke with wisdom and compassion. One morning during his meditation, something unexpected happened. For just a few seconds, perhaps less, There was no sense of being a separate self trying to meditate. There was just awareness, just presence, just this moment without anyone experiencing it. It was not dramatic or mystical. It was actually very simple, very ordinary. But when the sense of separate self returned, Kenji was left with a profound recognition. The stress and struggle he usually experienced were not inherent to life itself, but were created by the very sense of being a separate person who needed to control, manage, and perfect everything. When he shared this experience with the monk during his next visit, the elder's eyes lit up with recognition. "Ah," he said softly, "you have touched something important. What you experienced is what we call non-dual awareness, the recognition that the experiencer and the experienced are not actually separate. This is beyond the scope of practices and techniques. This is direct insight into the nature of reality." "Do not try to make it happen again," the monk cautioned. "Such experiences come when conditions are right, not through force of will. But let it inform your understanding. You now know directly that the separate self who feels stressed is itself a kind of illusion, or at least not as solid as it seems. This knowing will continue to work in you, deepening over time." Kenji felt both humbled and grateful. He understood that he had barely scratched the surface of what was possible, that the path of awakening went far deeper than stress relief. Yet he also felt that everything he had learned was exactly what he needed for this stage of his journey. He was not seeking to become a monk or to renounce the world. He was learning to live in the world with more wisdom, presence, and peace. As the year turned and a new one began, Kenji established what he thought of as his practice ecology, a sustainable structure that supported his well-being without becoming rigid. Each morning, he sat in meditation for at least 10 minutes, longer when time permitted. Throughout the day, he used small transitions as opportunities for presence. Before answering the phone, before entering a meeting, before starting a new task, he would take 3 conscious breaths. Each evening, he practiced gratitude and reflection. Once a week, he visited the temple or spent extended time in nature. And regularly, he allowed himself periods of true rest, of being rather than doing. This structure was not always followed perfectly. Life intervened. Circumstances demanded flexibility. But the structure was there as a container, as a commitment to his own well-being that took priority over the endless demands of productivity culture. One day, a young colleague approached Kenji, clearly struggling with stress and overwhelm. She had noticed the change in him and wondered if he had any advice. For a moment, Kenji felt the impulse to download everything he had learned, to share all 22 practices, to recount his entire journey. But then he paused, remembering how the monk had taught him, not through information dump, but through presence, through stories, through meeting him exactly where he was. "Tell me what is happening for you," Kenji said simply, giving her his full attention. She poured out her struggles. Too much work, impossible deadlines, feeling incompetent, unable to sleep. Kenji listened without interrupting, without trying to fix, just present with her experience. When she finished, he said, "What you are experiencing is really difficult. I know because I have been there. Would you like to learn one simple practice that might help?" She nodded eagerly. He taught her the basic practice of conscious breathing, of pausing when stress arises, of bringing attention to the present moment. Just one practice, simple and accessible. He gave her the name of the temple if she wanted to explore further, but he did not push. He simply offered what he could and trusted that she would find her own path. After she left, Kenji felt a quiet joy. He was beginning to share what he had learned, not as an expert, but as a fellow traveler who had found some useful tools. The teachings were not his to hoard, but to pass on. Ripples spreading outward from that first moment he had stumbled through the temple gate. That evening, sitting in meditation, Kenji reflected on his journey. 6 months ago, he had been drowning in stress, barely surviving, convinced that life was simply meant to be a struggle. Now, he still faced challenges, still experienced difficulty, but he met them differently. He had tools, understanding, perspective. He had learned that peace was not something to achieve in the future, but something to remember in the present. He had learned that he was not broken, but simply asleep, and that awakening was a gradual, gentle process of remembering his true nature. Most importantly, he had learned that he was not alone. Every person he passed on the street carried their own burdens, fought their own battles, longed for peace and ease. This recognition had softened his heart, made him more patient with others and with himself. As winter deepened, Kenji found himself drawn to longer periods of silence and introspection. The darkness and cold of the season seemed to invite turning inward, a natural rhythm that modern life often ignored in its relentless demand for constant activity regardless of season. The monk had taught him about honoring these natural rhythms, about recognizing that there were times for outward action and times for inner cultivation. One particularly cold evening, unable to visit the temple due to heavy snow, Kenji sat by his window and watched the snowflakes fall. Each flake was unique, appearing from nowhere, dancing briefly in the light of the street lamps, and disappearing into the accumulating drifts. The sight was mesmerizing, and Kenji found himself falling into a meditative state without formal practice, just watching, just present. He thought about how much the snowflakes resembled thoughts, appearing from nowhere, dancing briefly in the light of awareness, dissolving back into emptiness. No two exactly alike, yet all made of the same essential substance. When he held onto thoughts, tried to preserve them or push them away, he suffered. But when he let them fall naturally, appearing and disappearing on their own, there was ease. This spontaneous insight felt like a gift from the silence. Some of the most profound teachings he was discovering came not from words, but from direct observation of life. The natural world was a constant teacher if he paid attention. The patience of a tree growing, the persistence of water wearing down stone, the way seasons changed without resistance, each giving way to the next. The next time he visited the temple, the monk seemed pleased to hear about his observation. "Yes," he said, "this is the difference between learned understanding and realized understanding. You can hear a teaching 100 times and understand it intellectually. But when you see it directly in your own experience, it becomes wisdom. It transforms you because it is not something you believe, but something you know." As you continue this path, the monk said, pay attention to your own insights, your own direct seeing. Do not discount them as less valuable than what you read in books or hear from teachers. The purpose of teachings is to point you toward your own direct experience, not to replace it. The map is not the territory. The menu is not the meal. The teaching is not the realization. They walked together through the snowy temple grounds, their breath visible in the cold air. The world was hushed, blanketed in white, sounds muffled and softened. There was a purity to the scene that seemed to reflect the quality of a quiet mind. Thoughts settled like snow on the ground, a peaceful stillness prevailing. "Let me ask you something," the monk said. "When you look back at the man you were 6 months ago, what do you see?" Kenji considered the question carefully. "I see someone who was suffering without knowing he was suffering, who thought stress was just the price of living. I see someone who was disconnected from himself, from others, from life. I see someone who was so busy trying to control everything that he was controlling nothing, least of all his own mind and heart. I feel compassion for that person. He was doing his best with the understanding he had. And now," the monk prompted, "now I am still that person in many ways. The same patterns are still there. But there is awareness now. There is space. There is choice. I am not free from stress, but I am less enslaved by it. And perhaps most importantly, I am kinder to myself. I have stopped trying to be perfect and started trying to be present." The monk nodded with satisfaction. This is mature understanding. You are not claiming to be enlightened or completely transformed. You are simply acknowledging the progress you have made while remaining honest about the work that continues. This is the middle way, neither inflating your accomplishments nor dismissing them, neither striving compulsively nor becoming complacent. There is something I have been meaning to tell you, the monk said, after they had walked in silence for a while. You are ready now to understand a teaching that would have confused you when we first met. It is this. Ultimately, there is nothing to do and nowhere to get to. All the practices I have taught you, valuable as they are really just ways of helping you stop doing the things that create suffering. Peace is your natural state. You do not have to create it. You only have to stop disturbing it. All the striving, all the controlling, all the judging and resisting, these are what creates stress. When you let them go, peace is simply what remains. It was always there, underneath, like the sun behind clouds. The clouds seem so real, so solid, but they are just vapor. Let them pass, and the sun is revealed. It was shining all along. This teaching landed differently for Kenji than it would have months ago. Then he would have heard it as passive, as giving up. Now he understood it as profound wisdom. The deepest peace came not from achieving something, but from ceasing to disturb what already was. So all this practice, Kenji said slowly, is really about unlearning rather than learning. Yes, the monk confirmed. You are unlearning the habit of stress. You are unlearning the belief that you are separate from life. You are unlearning the conditioning that tells you that you must constantly prove your worth. You are unlearning the patterns that were installed in you by family, culture, and circumstance. Underneath all that conditioning is your original nature, whole, complete, at peace. Does that mean I should stop practicing? Kenji asked, confused. The monk laughed gently. No. The practices continue, but your relationship to them changes. You practice not to get somewhere, but to express and embody the peace that is already present. You meditate not to become peaceful, but because you are peace itself, and meditation is one of the natural expressions of that peace. Do you see the difference? It is subtle but important. Kenji was beginning to see. Practice was no longer about self-improvement, about fixing what was broken. It was about aligning with what was already true, clearing away the obstacles to the recognition of his fundamental nature. As spring approached, bringing with it the promise of renewal and growth, Kenji found himself reflecting on a full year since that first morning when he had stumbled into the temple courtyard. An entire cycle of seasons had passed, and he had changed in ways both subtle and profound. The most obvious change was that his chronic stress had significantly diminished. He still faced challenges at work and in his personal life, still encountered situations that triggered old patterns, but his baseline level of tension had dropped dramatically. He no longer woke with his heart racing, no longer carried that constant undercurrent of anxiety that had been his companion for so many years. But deeper changes had also occurred. His relationship with himself had transformed. The harsh inner critic, while still present, no longer dominated his internal landscape. He had learned to meet himself with compassion, to acknowledge his humanness with gentleness rather than judgment. This shift in internal environment had profound effects on his external life as well. His relationships had improved significantly. When he was more present, less distracted by his own internal turmoil, he could actually see and hear other people. He listened better, empathized more readily, responded with greater wisdom. People felt the difference and responded in kind, creating a positive spiral of connection. His work had also shifted, though not in the ways he might have expected. He was not necessarily more productive in terms of sheer output, but his work was better quality. He brought focus and presence to each task rather than scattered attention across many. He made decisions with clarity rather than from fear. He could rest in uncertainty rather than forcing premature solutions. Most surprisingly, opportunities had begun appearing in his life, a new client relationship that aligned perfectly with his values, a potential career shift that excited him in ways he had not felt in years. He could not explain exactly how his internal transformation was creating these external changes, but the correlation was undeniable. Perhaps, he thought, when you stop clinging desperately to control everything, life has more room to surprise you. One afternoon in early spring, Kenji sat with the monk beneath the cherry tree where they had first talked. The tree was beginning to bloom, delicate pink flowers emerging from branches that had been bare all winter. The sight was achingly beautiful, a reminder of life's constant renewal. Every year, the monk said, gesturing to the blossoms, this tree teaches the same lesson. It loses every leaf, stands bare and seemingly dead through winter, and then blooms again. It holds nothing back. It does not protect a few blossoms out of fear that spring might not come. It trusts the cycle. It participates fully in each season. Lush growth in summer, vibrant color in autumn, stark beauty in winter, abundant flowering in spring. This is how we are meant to live, he continued, fully present to each season of our lives, trusting the cycles, not clinging to what must pass, not resisting what must come. You have lived through a complete cycle now. You have experienced stress and begun to release it. You have suffered and found tools for working with suffering. You have been winter, bare, and stripped down. Now, spring comes. New possibilities emerge. And you are ready for them because you did not skip winter, did not try to force spring to arrive before its time. Kenji felt the truth of this deeply. His time in winter, the months of intense stress before finding the temple, the difficult work of facing his patterns, had been necessary. He could not have skipped to spring. The transformation required the entire cycle. I want to tell you something important, the monk said, his tone becoming more serious. You have been coming here for a year now, and you have learned well. But you must understand that I am not essential to your continued practice. The teachings are now in you. Your own experience is your teacher. You are welcome here always, but you do not need to depend on me or this place. The peace you have found was never in this temple. It was always in you. The temple just helped you remember. Kenji felt a momentary panic at the thought of losing this anchor, this wise guide who had helped him so much. But then he recognized the panic as another form of clinging, another way his mind tried to hold on to what must eventually be released. The monk was right. The teachings lived in him now. He had his own direct experience to guide him. I understand, Kenji said quietly, and I am grateful beyond words for what you have given me. But I also know that the real gift was not the teachings themselves, but the awakening to my own capacity for peace, my own wisdom. The monk smiled with obvious pleasure. Now you truly understand. This is the mark of a good student, recognizing that the teacher can only point to what is already present within. You have done the real work yourself. Every moment of practice, every time you chose awareness over reactivity, every instance of self-compassion, these were your own efforts, your own opening. They sat together in companionable silence, watching petals fall from the cherry tree like gentle snow. Kenji realized that this was itself a kind of meditation, this simple presence with a moment of natural beauty. No words needed, no striving for insight, just being. Before you go today, the monk said, I want to offer you one final teaching. It is about the purpose of all this work we have done. You came here seeking relief from stress, and you have found it. But the deeper purpose of spiritual practice is not just personal peace. It is to discover your interconnection with all life and to let that discovery inform how you live. When you are less burdened by your own suffering, he continued, you have more capacity to see and respond to the suffering of others. When you have found some peace within yourself, you can be a presence of peace in the world. This is not about becoming a teacher or taking on some special role. It is simply about living in a way that reduces suffering rather than adds to it, starting with yourself, but naturally extending outward. Your work in the world, the monk continued, whatever form it takes, becomes an expression of your practice. You are not practicing to escape the world, but to engage with it more fully, more consciously. The peace you cultivate is not for you alone. It ripples outward in ways you may never fully see. Kenji understood that he was being offered a profound reframing of spiritual practice. It was not selfish or self-absorbed to work with his own mind and heart. It was actually one of the most generous things he could do, because a person at peace contributes peace to every situation they encounter. A person who has worked with their own reactivity responds to others with more wisdom and compassion. He thought about the young colleague he had helped, about how his own transformation had allowed him to be present for her struggle in a way he could not have been a year ago. He thought about how his increased presence at work had calmed situations that might have escalated into unnecessary conflict. He thought about small moments of kindness he had been able to offer, because he was not completely consumed by his own turmoil. "I am beginning to see," Kenji said, "that this practice has never really been about me as an isolated individual. Everything I do, every state of mind I cultivate affects everyone I encounter. We are not separate. My peace contributes to collective peace. My stress contributes to collective stress." "Yes," the monk affirmed. "This is the understanding of interdependence at its deepest level. You are not a separate self who must look out only for your own interests. You are a part of the whole, and the well-being of the whole depends on the well-being of each part. When you take care of yourself, you take care of the world. When you neglect yourself, the world suffers your neglect." The afternoon was growing late, and Kenji knew he would need to leave soon, but he felt no hurry, no anxiety about time passing. He was simply here, in this moment, soaking in the last of the monk's wisdom. "Let me tell you one last story," the monk said. "There was once a master who was asked by a student, 'What is the most important practice?' The master replied, 'Whatever you are doing right now, do it completely. If you are sweeping, sweep completely. If you are eating, eat completely. If you are resting, rest completely. If you are working, work completely. Do not do one thing while wishing you were doing another. Do not be half present. The most important practice is wholehearted engagement with this moment.' This is what I wish for you," the monk said, looking directly into Kenji's eyes. "That you live wholeheartedly. That you give yourself fully to each moment of your life, whether it is pleasant or difficult, whether it is extraordinary or mundane. This is what it means to be fully alive. Not to have a life free of problems, but to meet your life completely, holding nothing back." Kenji felt tears rising, though whether they were tears of gratitude, sadness at this subtle goodbye, or simply tears of recognition, he could not say. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything, for seeing me when I could not see myself, for offering practices when I had none, for believing in my capacity to transform when I had given up hope. Thank you." The monk placed both hands on Kenji's shoulders and looked at him with profound kindness. "You have honored the teachings by applying them, by testing them in your life, by allowing them to transform you. This is all a teacher can hope for. Go now and live well. The temple will be here whenever you need it, but more importantly, the temple within you is always accessible. You carry it wherever you go." Kenji stood, bowed deeply, deeper than he ever had before, and slowly walked toward the gate. He turned back once to see the monk still sitting beneath the cherry tree, surrounded by falling petals, like a figure from an ancient painting. The image imprinted itself in Kenji's memory, something he knew he would return to again and again. As he walked home through the city streets, Kenji felt different. Not dramatically transformed, but subtly, fundamentally changed. The city was the same, loud, crowded, chaotic, but he moved through it differently. He was not fighting against it, not seeing it as an obstacle to peace. He was simply moving through it, breathing, aware, present. The chaos was just chaos. It was not personal. It was not a problem to solve. It was just the nature of city life, and he could be at peace with it even while immersed in it. That evening, Kenji sat down to write. He wanted to capture what he had learned before time began to blur the clarity of his insights. He wrote about the 22 practices, about the stories the monk had shared, about his own direct experiences. But most importantly, he wrote about what all of this had meant to him, the shift from being controlled by stress to working skillfully with it, from being at war with himself to befriending himself, from feeling separate and alone to recognizing his interconnection with all life. He wrote not for anyone else, but for himself, wanting to document this journey so that in future moments of forgetting, and he knew there would be many, he could return to these words and remember what he had learned. He wrote about the simplicity beneath all the practices. Pause, breathe, notice, be kind to yourself. He wrote about how transformation was not dramatic but gradual, not about becoming someone different, but about removing what obscured his true nature. When he finished writing, Kenji felt a sense of completion. A cycle had closed. He had begun as a person drowning in stress and had become someone who knew how to swim in life's turbulent waters. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but with tools, with understanding, with compassion. As he prepared for sleep that night, he followed his evening practice, reviewing the day with gratitude, noting moments of presence and moments of forgetfulness, offering himself compassion for being human. Then he practiced loving kindness, sending well wishes to himself, to the monk, to his colleagues, to all beings everywhere. And finally, he simply rested, allowing sleep to come naturally, trusting that tomorrow would bring what it would bring, and that he would meet it with whatever wisdom and presence he could muster. The months that followed were both ordinary and extraordinary. Ordinary in that Kenji's life continued with all its usual elements, work responsibilities, relationships, daily tasks. Extraordinary in that his relationship to all of it had fundamentally shifted. He was no longer living on autopilot, no longer sleepwalking through his days in a fog of stress and distraction. He noticed himself becoming more spontaneous, more playful. The rigid control that had characterized his previous way of being was softening. He could laugh at his own mistakes more easily. He could adapt when plans changed without spiraling into anxiety. He could tolerate uncertainty without immediately trying to force clarity. His meditation practice had evolved beyond technique into a natural settling. When he sat in the morning, he was not trying to achieve some special state or perform the practice correctly. He was simply sitting, breathing, being present with whatever arose. Some mornings his mind was quiet. Other mornings it churned with thoughts. Both were okay. Both were the practice. He had also begun to notice something curious. Moments of spontaneous presence arising throughout his day, without any deliberate practice. He would be walking and suddenly become acutely aware of the sensation of his feet touching the ground. He would be drinking coffee and suddenly the taste would become vivid, as though he were truly tasting coffee for the first time. He would be in conversation and suddenly be completely present, hearing not just words but the emotion beneath words, seeing not just a person but a human being with dreams and fears and hopes just like his own. These moments felt like grace, like gifts. He had not made them happen. They arose naturally from the groundwork of practice he had been laying. It was as though his mind was learning a new habit, the habit of presence, and was beginning to default to it more and more. One day at work, a crisis arose. A major mistake had been made on an important project, and the team was scrambling to fix it before the client discovered. The old Kenji would have panicked, would have looked for someone to blame, would have tightened into crisis mode and spread that tension to everyone around him. But this Kenji paused. He took a breath. He felt his feet on the floor. He acknowledged the challenge without catastrophizing it. Then he spoke to his team calmly. Okay, this is a difficult situation. Let us look clearly at what happened and what needs to happen now. No blame, no panic. just clear seeing and appropriate action. The effect on the team was immediate. The anxiety in the room decreased. People began thinking clearly rather than reactively. They identified the problem, developed a solution, and implemented it efficiently. The situation was resolved with far less drama than such situations had historically created in that workplace. Afterward, one of his team members approached him. "I do not know what has changed with you," she said, "but whatever you have been doing, keep doing it. You have become the kind of leader people want to follow, calm in crisis, clear-headed, kind, but not weak. It makes all the difference." Kenji felt grateful for the feedback, but also careful not to let it inflate his ego. He knew he was still learning, still practicing. He had good days and difficult days. The difference was that he no longer judged himself harshly on the difficult days. They were just part of the cycle, winter within the larger seasons of his growth. That evening, he returned to the temple for the first time in weeks, not because he needed to, but because he wanted to. The monk was exactly where Kenji had first found him, sitting beneath the cherry tree, now in full leaf with the blossoms long since fallen. "Welcome back," the monk said warmly, though not with surprise, as though he had known Kenji would return when the time was right. They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, and then Kenji shared about his recent experiences, the spontaneous moments of presence, the crisis at work, the sense of practice becoming more natural and integrated. The monk listened with evident pleasure. "You are discovering what we call effortless effort. At first, practice requires discipline and intention. You must remember to pause, remember to breathe, remember to be present. But gradually, the practices become second nature. They happen through you more than by you. Presence becomes your default, rather than something you have to work to achieve." This does not mean you can abandon formal practice, he cautioned. The daily meditation, the deliberate cultivation of awareness, these continue to be important. They are like watering the roots of a plant. The flowers appear on their own, but the roots need tending. Your spontaneous moments of presence are the flowers. Your daily practice is the watering of roots. Kenji understood. He had not abandoned his morning meditation or evening reflection practices, and he did not intend to. But those practices now served more as maintenance and deepening, rather than as emergency interventions for overwhelming stress. "There is something else happening," the monk observed. "You are beginning to embody the teachings rather than just applying them." There is a difference. When you apply teachings, you are using techniques to manage your experience. When you embody teachings, you have become the teaching. Your very presence communicates peace, awareness, compassion, not because you are trying to, but because that is what you have become. This is the natural progression of practice. First, you learn techniques, then you apply techniques, then the techniques become habits, then the habits become your nature. You are moving through these stages, not complete, that may take a lifetime or many lifetimes, but definitely progressing. They walked through the garden together, and Kenji noticed how his mind was quiet, not spinning with questions or seeking insights. He was simply walking with his teacher, enjoying the evening light, present with what was. This itself was the teaching, this simple being together without agenda. "I have been thinking about something," Kenji said after a while. "You taught me that stress arises from resisting what is, from the gap between what is happening and what we think should be happening. I have verified this in my own experience countless times. But I wonder, is there never a place for wanting things to be different? Is acceptance passive resignation?" The monk smiled, clearly pleased by the depth of the question. This is an important distinction, and many people become confused about it. Acceptance is not about approving of everything or never wanting change. It is about acknowledging what is true in this moment, without the layer of resistance that creates suffering. From that place of clear seeing, you can work toward change if change is needed. "Let me give you an example," he continued. "Imagine you break your leg. You can accept that your leg is broken. This is simply reality, while still taking appropriate action to heal it. You do not sit there saying, "My leg should not be broken. This is terrible. Why did this happen to me?" That resistance adds suffering without helping your leg heal. Instead, you accept, "My leg is broken. This is the current reality." Now, what is the wise response? You seek medical care, you rest, you follow treatment protocols. You are working toward change, but from acceptance rather than resistance. The difference, the monk explained, is in the energy you bring to your desire for change. When you want change from resistance, there is tightness, urgency, suffering in the wanting itself. You are at war with what is. When you want change from acceptance, there is openness, clarity, space. You can work for change without suffering over the fact that change has not yet occurred. "So I can accept my current level of stress while also working to reduce it?" Kenji asked, testing his understanding. "Exactly," the monk confirmed. You say, "Right now, I am experiencing stress. This is what is true in this moment. I accept this reality. And from this acceptance, I can apply practices that may help reduce the stress." There is no war between acceptance and change. They support each other. Paradoxically, when you stop fighting against your stress, you actually create more space for it to release. They returned to sit beneath the cherry tree as twilight deepened into evening. Fireflies began to appear, their lights winking on and off in the growing darkness, like stars fallen to earth. "You know," the monk said, his voice taking on a reflective quality, "in all the months you have been coming here, you have never asked me about enlightenment. You have never asked about achieving some special state or becoming someone extraordinary. You have only asked about working with your stress, being more present, living more wisely. This is actually quite rare and very mature. Many people come to spiritual practice seeking something dramatic, mystical experiences, supernatural abilities, complete transcendence of their humanness. They want to escape being human, rather than learning to be fully human. But you have instinctively understood that the path is about being completely, wholeheartedly human. About meeting your human experience with awareness and compassion." Kenji reflected on this. It was true. He had never sought enlightenment, whatever that meant. He had simply wanted to suffer less, to live more peacefully, to show up more fully for his life. And in pursuing these humble goals, he had found something much more valuable than any concept of enlightenment. He had found his way home to himself. Perhaps that is the real meaning of enlightenment, the monk mused. Not becoming superhuman, but becoming fully, authentically human. Not transcending your humanity, but embracing it completely. Not escaping the world, but engaging with it wholeheartedly. The Buddha was called the awakened one. But awakened to what? To the nature of human experience, to the causes of suffering, and the path to freedom from unnecessary suffering. He was radically, completely human. As the night deepened and the fireflies multiplied around them, Kenji felt a profound contentment. He had been searching without knowing what he was searching for, and he had found something beyond his imagining. Not because it was exotic or transcendent, but because it was so simple, so ordinary, so completely available in each moment. Peace was not somewhere else. It was here, now, in the cooling air, the flickering lights, the presence of this wise old monk, the sensation of breath moving through his body. "I think," Kenji said slowly, "that I have learned what I most needed to learn, that I am enough, that this moment is enough, that I do not need to be other than I am or somewhere other than I am, that peace is not a distant goal but a present possibility, that I am not broken or lacking, just temporarily confused, and that confusion can clear, that I am not alone but part of something vast and interconnected, that stress is not my enemy but a teacher, that I can meet whatever life brings with presence and compassion." The monk reached over and placed his hand on Kenji's. "Yes," he said simply. "Yes, You have understood, not just intellectually, but in your bones, in your heart, in your direct experience. This is what matters. Not what you can say about peace, but whether you can be peace, embody peace, offer peace to the world through your presence. They sat together in silence as the night wrapped around them, two humans sharing a moment of profound connection and understanding. No words were needed. The fireflies danced. The leaves rustled in the gentle breeze. The temple bell rang once, marking the hour. And everything was exactly as it needed to be. Eventually, Kenji rose to leave. He bowed to the monk, and they smiled at each other with the understanding of teacher and student, friend and friend, two souls who had met in this life to support each other's awakening. Walking home through the peaceful night, Kenji felt complete. Not finished. He knew his practice would continue for the rest of his life, but complete in this moment, whole, at peace. The path stretched ahead, unknown and unknowable, but he would meet it step by step, breath by breath, moment by moment. And that was enough. He was enough. This moment was enough. Everything was, finally and fully, enough. As he drifted off to sleep that night, Kenji's last conscious thought was a simple whisper of gratitude. Thank you. For this life. For this breath. For this moment. For everything. Thank you. And then, sleep came, deep and dreamless, and completely restful. The sleep of someone who has come home to themselves at last.